And we are back. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, y'all.
Hope you guys like our new intro because we got tired of the last one. This is a new year, new us.
Yes.
So anyways, what you got planned today for us, Kathy?
So for today's topic, I did some research and there were some facts that caught my attention and I wanted to share with you guys. The first fact that caught my attention was that less than 50% of adolescents reported in 2015 to 2019 that they had received instruction on where to get birth control before they had sex for the first time, which that was very alarming to me because I was expecting more than 50%. And it kind of worries me.
Yeah, and I actually also found a fact, and it was in 2015 to 2019, adolescent females were more likely than males to report receipt of instruction on waiting until marriage, versus males were more likely to report instruction about condoms. So there's a disparity in sex education in gender.
Okay, so why are we bringing this up? Like, why did you guys give these stats?
Because like I know for like sex health and sex ed, it's not. I've noticed and conversations that I have in the past, it's not really something that is talked about. It's very taboo. I know in my like Latino culture and even in just like I feel in the United States, it's not really talked about. So I wanted to ask you guys, what misconceptions in sexuality or sex have you guys had in the past?
Do you have one?
That is a good question. I just feel like sex in general. When I think of a story, I think in general, sex education is not talked about much in schools. With me and my friends, we all went to the same school, and I know it wasn't talked about with us, because I can't think of a story.
I can go.
Right
so
away.
for a misconception, I would say, I think growing up, I just remember, like, especially being Latina, like, always being told, like, oh wow, you haven't got pregnant. And so to me, I feel like they made getting pregnant sound like it was so easy. And, after having the education that I've had and just, just my experiences and stuff, like, I've realized that it's not as easy to get pregnant as people make it seem, because there's like a lot that goes into like your cycle and just a lot of things that go into actually conceiving. So that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions.
And for me, I'm not going to comment on the biggest misconception. Is that how you say it? Mm-hmm. But I went to Catholic schools all my life, from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. And not to say that was the reason why sex education wasn't taught, because hearing other people's stories, sex education wasn't even talked about as it should have been, like in public school system. But the only thing I remember in school, especially high school, I want to say, is the first time we had a sex ed conversation, and it was taught by a PE teacher. Mm-hmm. And she did not teach us much. All I remember a lot in school was even family members saying, like, just don't have sex. If you have sex, you're gonna get pregnant. That was like the only type of sex education that was taught. You have sex, you'll get pregnant. And then I remember in high school, the teacher that was teaching the sex education for that one day, it felt like just a day. Mm-hmm. The only thing I remember is her putting like a condom on I think it was a banana, and she even tried to put it on like a student's shoe just for fun. But it was not talked about at all, really.
I feel like it was because we went to the same high school. It was more taken like as a joke. Like it was like a laughing matter in a way. And then I guess for me, one misconception was that you have, once you're in birth control, and if you don't want to get pregnant, you're in birth control for life. And I have learned that yes, you have to take birth control, but it is very important to take breaks from birth control, because that could affect your fertility, which is going to be talked about in like a future episode. But that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I had. And yeah, like I was just popping pills every day.
Whoa.
Trying not to get pregnant. So, and I started young, like I was 16. And then I didn't stop taking pills until I was like, I would say 22, 23.
So, okay, so my question is, what made you get on birth control? Like, did you who did you have that conversation with that made you say, "Hey, I want to get on birth control"?
Good question.
Because
So the thing was, and this kind of, and then also now thinking about it is worrisome to me now, because I got my period, I want to say when I was 13, 12. And I had like, I'll go like yearly to like controls with my doctor. And never did she ask me about birth control until I was 16. And I'm like, well, what happened if, I was curious and I had sex before 16? Like,
or at least
where would I have got that information
or
from?
at least asking you, were they asking you if you were sexually active?
No, I don't remember her asking. And then also it was because it was a whole thing with health insurance that I had, because again, like, I didn't have my papers, so I would be jumping around from like physician to physician.
Yeah.
Then the information would get like missed, and it was hard. So yeah, I only started when I was 16, and I felt like she just push and push and push the pills, like no other contraceptive. Like she would talk about it, but it was like, no, but for you, the pills. And I'm like, oh,
the pills
okay.
is the way to go.
Do you remember if, aside from like the whole contraceptive, if they were telling you like, oh, by the way, this only protects you against pregnancy and it doesn't, protect you against like STDs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like when and that was another misconception of mine, that when you use condom, it was only going to prevent you from pregnancy. But no, condoms prevents you from STI. So it's just like,
but then again, not all.
Not really.
So
Not all
that's
of
the
them.
reason
Yeah.
why they don't push that, because it's
then
more so condoms prevents against pregnancy, but not sexually transmitted disease.
I can kind of see why they would tell you that, because I can totally see someone be like, oh, well, I'm protected, like
Yeah.
from STDs,
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. They don't push saying that
It makes
protects,
sense that they wouldn't.
STDs.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, like they talked to me about it, but then I learned more about it. And I guess just because I was pre-med in college, that's when I really like got more into it.
And I'm gonna go back to like high school. I don't know if you.
I was gonna go back to high school.
Oh, yeah, because
actually,
I want to go to high school before we move on to like college
I
and whatever.
was gonna go to high school. I remember, I went to Catholic school as well, and I remember when the teacher came in, and he was a teacher for human sexuality. And I just remember it was not like too in depth, but I just remember them saying, don't have sex. I don't remember anything else besides don't have sex. So that's as far, I think, as I remember my sex education going.
Yeah. For me, in high school, I wasn't having sex in high school. I was not having sex in high school. So when I remember I had to go get checkups and stuff, because I played a lot of sports. And so I had to get physicals done. And I remember going to La Clinica, because La Clinica was really close to St. Elizabeth, which is, La Clinica was like near Fruitville or whatever.
Yeah.
So I remember I used to get so annoyed when
They'd ask you?
they would constantly ask me like, "Oh, are you having sex?" And I'm like, "No." And I felt like they just knew I was lying, because they were like, "Oh, well, here, go take these packs of condoms with you just in case." I was like, "I'm not having sex." It was like, "Here, just take them. It was like, "If you need birth control, we can give you that too." So I feel that they were more pushing for just like sex prevention, and like not sex prevention, just being more proactive in everything. So that's high school was when sorry, I'm like literally because I got a text message, sorry. But yeah, so I feel like that was like the main thing, is just they were trying to educate me in sexual health, or just like sex education. But then again, like I said, I wasn't having sex, so I was like, I don't care what you have to say, in a sense.
Question. Did your parents bring this up? And if they did, what age?
Like, do you mean sex? Or, because I was going to talk about periods too. Like, for us, you have to learn about your period when it comes and all that. For sex? No. Yeah. They never talked to me about sex. They only just said, like, don't have sex. That was it. Like, you're going to get pregnant, don't
And Kathy was
sex.
like, let's go this way.
I'm like, so you say have sex? Like,
and that is the reason why sex education is so important to be taught about to their kids, because I feel like parents just assume that their kids are angels and would never have sex in high school or not even in middle school. But it's like, it's better to be proactive than reactive.
Funny story. Now I just remembered. So with my parents, or, you know, they were like, they didn't ask me if I was having sex or anything, but they were like, if you're going to live in this household, you will be on birth control. And I was like, what? Why? I'm not even having sex. You know?
That is funny.
And I was like, okay, I guess. So I was like, I guess I'm going on birth control, but I wasn't having sex or anything. They were just being proactive and making sure that if I was having sex, which I wasn't, that we wouldn't have a baby on the way. And yeah.
Why do you think that they said that? Was it because you were just getting older in age?
I think it was just because I was at the age that I probably should have, like, you know, it's normal to be having sex
but you were a virgin.
I was a virgin. And yeah, so they were like, you need to get on birth control. They just didn't want me to have a baby before I was ready. And I think that was just their way of having the sex talk with me, I guess. I don't know.
No.
Yeah, and me, I never had the sex talk with my parents that I remember. My mom never had it. Of course, my dad never had it with me. But I want to say the closest, because I'm the youngest as well. So I had an older sister. She probably never had the sex talk either, but getting advice from her, she was only like 3 years older than me. So getting advice from her probably wasn't the best idea either, because she probably didn't know better either.
Sorry, but do you remember any of that advice? I'm just nosy.
No, see, I would have to think about it and then I'll bring it back. But I just remember my aunt. So my aunt, who's also my godmom, she would be the one that would try to like hint for like a sexual education talk in a sense, but never came out and say like, "Oh, are you having sex?"
Yeah.
For her, it was more so she was giving her personal stories when she was my age and said like, you know, she did this at this age and the importance of why being on birth control and just being not even just birth control, but just being aware of like all the diseases, STIs and stuff out there. So that was her indirectly having the conversation with me and trying to educate me about like sexual health and just sex education.
It is really important because, I mean, honestly, like when you're young, you don't think about STDs, STIs. You don't think about any of that.
You don't even know what all STDs is and what it could do to you.
Right.
And everything.
Or how you can get one. Like, because, you know, some people just think like, oh, you have to just have like penetration for you to get in. It's like, no, like you could get it transmitted a different way.
Yeah.
And then like I feel like for me, sex, it was like I had to hide it. Like my pills, I had to hide it. Like if I had like hickeys or whatever, I had like I was always like so worried that my parents would never find out that I was having sex.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it wasn't even talked about in my house. Like they didn't even say like, well, babies come from blah blah blah. Nothing.
I have a good question. Okay, so my question is, the way you grew up and them and sex and all of that being not talked about, does this make you want to parent in a different way? Thiago, does this make you want to parent Thiago in a different way?
Yes. So of course with Thiago, with my son, I want him to be a gentleman. I want him to teach him about consent. I want him to teach him everything that's out there, so he doesn't get information from the wrong sources or get just wrong information. Period.
Yeah.
So like even if Carlos doesn't have the talk, I'll have the talk with him, and I want him to learn everything on how to treat a woman, because nowadays how to treat a woman is different from like how I was taught on how a woman should be treated. You know?
Yeah. And I feel like that's good that you're already thinking about that, because at least you're thinking about, teaching him like sex education, because in that way, at least if his friends parents aren't teaching him that, at least they can use him as a resource and get like accurate information. Because it's like if Thiago didn't know anything, plus his friends, it's just like be a whole mess. But if, like one person, at least in the friend group, know a little bit of something,
somebody have a sound mind,
right? Because it was like I didn't know I had 3 holes. Into like I was like 16. I'm like I had 3 holes. Like I'm serious, dude. Like I didn't know.
Hey, at least you're 16. Some don't notice or know that until way later.
Yeah, but then like there is a lot of stuff that could go wrong, that you could get hurt because you don't know you're an enemy.
Yeah.
Okay. I also want to go back on the question of you saying that you had to hide it from your parents. For me, let me just ask my question. Was the reason that you felt like you had to hide it even more, like besides your parents, was because maybe you went to a Catholic school? Because I know for me, I just remember all the time saying like sex is bad. Sex is bad. If you have sex without being in marriage, you're going to go to hell. This and that. You're a hoe. Like even like the whole, you shouldn't be masturbating. It's a sin and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think also too, because so I was raised, my parents, before coming to this country, my parents were like very, very Catholic, and I was going to private school, and it was always Catholic. And then even before I came here to this country, I was going to like a all girls school, non-run school.
None.
Yes, none. So like
I remember I'm like, I'm not going to no holy names.
I know, my parents tried to send me there too.
I was like, I went on a tour. I was like, holy names ain't for me.
They tried to send me there too. I was like,
no. So then I was always thought like, don't, like, if you have sex, you're gonna get pregnant right away. If you have sex, like, it's bad for you. If you have sex without marriage, like, you're committing a sin. So I think that was like, I was just scared to be like, for my parents to be ashamed of me, you know, especially my dad.
Yeah.
For him to be like, wow, my only daughter is already like having sex and she's young, and then like, you know, even though I feel like it's normal, like, you know,
It is.
I think it is.
It's a part of life.
Yes,
It's part of life. Instead of like, you know, it's an uncomfortable topic. Because I want to have that conversation with my kid and make it as comfortable as possible. But me even having the thought of having that conversation with like at a young age with my dad or even with my mom, it would have been very uncomfortable. Of course, I would rather have a conversation with like a female than like a male.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I could relate to them more, but that would have been so uncomfortable.
Yeah. With that being said, is there an age that you think you want Thiago to know about sex and all that comes with it and everything?
I don't want to because he's my baby, but I know it has to get done. So I think a good age will be like 13.
And do you feel that you have to do it first before school does?
Yeah, it's just right now with the school and the whole school system is kind of weird. But I would rather me having that conversation with him, because I feel like maybe he might be more comfortable asking me questions, and I might have the answer when the teacher with.
Oh, girl, you'll have that answer. Don't worry.
And then, you know, at school, you're kind of like, oh, everybody's looking at me, or they're gonna think I'm having sex, because that was another thing. If you literally had like questions about sexuality, then everybody thought like, oh, it's because she's having sex.
Yeah, and kids are just they're just little a-holes anyway, so I can see that, like, even being in high school or even middle school, and then them thinking because you're asking the question, you must be over there having sex, or whatever questions you're asking, you're relating to it.
Yeah. So yeah, I would rather probably start at 13 and then me educating him.
What about you, Jasmine? Do you feel like there's an age where you want to teach your kids about sexual education?
To be honest, I haven't really thought of the age, but I would probably say like maybe 13, 14. And I definitely would want to bring it up with my kids before school, because I want to have that relationship where my child can feel comfortable asking me the weirdest, craziest things, because I'm their parent and I want them to feel comfortable with me. I definitely feel like the talk about sex is definitely uncomfortable. I don't think there's a way to not feel uncomfortable about it. Like, that's your baby, but it has to be done, like Kathy said, and I rather do it myself, and it's a part of life, you know?
Yeah.
So,
and I think people who are very like sex positive, maybe they don't have shyness of having that conversation. Because I even like listen to podcasts where they're just very sex positive, and their parents are that way too. So when they had that talk with their parents, it was normal for them in a sense. For me, I feel that I want to say 12, 13, I would start having the conversation about it, because it's important. Like, it'll be uncomfortable, but I choose like around the same age as well.
Yeah. I think definitely around the time because there's like an age, I think it's like 12, 13. That's when I was studying for my MCAT. I learned that there's an age where, like with puberty, right? Like you start to get these sexual urges and things like that. And so I think around that time would be really good to have the conversation.
And speaking of like your MCAT and everything, one thing I do like now about healthcare is that they're allowing, I thought it was like 13 and up, but I feel like today, we just realized it's any age that a kid can basically go to their doctor and request for birth control. Which is a good thing because a lot of the times parents do not want their kid on birth control because they're just assuming that if they put them on birth control they're gonna start having sex.
Yeah.
Which
wasn't the case because look at me.
And how many kids you got, Jasmine? Zero. And how many kids you got?
I have 2 puppies.
Well, I'm just kidding.
Look how that turned out. No.
She has 2 homeless dogs.
2 geriatrics.
Okay, so what are some of like the craziest stories that you guys had about or heard about like sex and like sex education or the lack of sex education?
Kathy?
So I had a friend, and this was already in college, and she calls me like freaked out. She's like 911, like an emergency, right? And I'm like, what's going on? What happened? And she's like, well, she didn't really want to say it, but she's like, I don't have nobody else to turn to, and I was assuming, well, why don't you go to your mom? Like,
because she know Kathy was having sex a long time ago.
So then she says, I was like dry humping with my boyfriend, and I was wearing leggings, and I was like, and then she's like,
Kathy's waiting for the reveal.
The thing is, like, she started like, I think I'm pregnant. I'm like, what the hell? And I'm like, why? And then I was like, explain to me, why do you think you're pregnant? And that's when she's like, oh, it's because I was dry humping with my boyfriend, and I was wearing leggings, and I was like, and it's like, and he came, and I'm like, okay, where did he came? And then he's like, and then she's like, oh, in like by my thigh, like my inner thigh, and I think I'm pregnant. And I'm like, no. I'm like, that's not how it works. Like, it could travel up there, and I'm like, it won't travel all the way up to your vagina. Like,
they're swimmers, but
not like. And then she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, because it's already cold outside, and the sperm leaves like, the temperature is gonna kill them. Like, you are okay. And then she's like, should I take a plan B? And I'm like, no.
You don't even waste your time, don't waste your money.
I was like, and then like I had to educate her in a way about that, but I was so surprised because this was in like this was over 21-year-old. Like, I'm like, you didn't know this?
Yeah.
And honestly, I think a lot of that has to do with like let's say that person or they have a close relationship with their parents where they could have had that education, or I think that could have, again, this is why we educate, I think that's very important in breaking down these misconceptions and
the importance of sex education, because she is not the only one. I've heard
she's not.
many stories.
No,
even myself, in the sense that I should have known better. I did not know better. That I'm so embarrassed to say this.
Say it.
But one misconception that I had, and that was my older years in life. Like, I was at an old age, and I should have known this, but I thought that if I had
sorry, dude, I'm trying.
And keep in mind, we're saying this because we're trying to break down the misconceptions and I think a lot of people don't realize how sex ed we gloss over it. We don't really, go. I don't want to say deep dive, but
exactly. Look at us already getting uncomfortable, just even like trying to tell a story. But even for me, I thought that literally a person can take a pregnancy test right after having unprotected sex, but that's not the case. You at least
she wasted a lot of money.
At least they wait 21 days or so to take a test. You can't take a test the day after. You can take a test after your missed period to see, but it's right after sex. That is not the case.
Or like first response says,
money.
3 days before your missed period.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
There you go. That's the one I took when I I had a feeling I was pregnant.
This is not an ad.
This is not a.
I don't have a story right now, so you might just have to go again.
Okay, another story that I had, but this was not about sex, but it was more about like how to wear a pad. Like,
Okay, let's hear
just
it.
say
Okay.
Whatever story. We need time,
okay,
girl.
so I had a friend, and then we were already in high school. This was like junior year, yeah, because we were downstairs already. So it was junior year, and she comes freaking out. By this time, I thought everybody had their period by this time, because we're about to be like what 16, 17, but she got it late, and I didn't know.
Wait, she had it that late?
Yeah. And she came freaking out like, Kathy, I need to come to the bathroom with me, blah, blah, blah. And then I don't remember what the hell I was doing. I was like, oh, okay, like, let me go. Like, I thought it was like an emergency, like a big emergency. And then she was kind of like a shame of like asking for help. But I was like, it's okay. Because even for me, my mom didn't even taught me how to wear a pad. Like, it was the person that took care of me at the time that taught me how to wear a pad. But I was,
Was that because you had the period while you're with that lady and your mom
Yes.
wasn't around, or?
So basically, this was in Colombia because so my parents would work and then after I got out of school, they had to leave me with somebody to take care of me so they could keep working. So I was getting like cramps, and then she was getting like the lady that was taking care of me. She was getting scared that I was gonna get it like that day. So then she went to the store. I remember she went to the store. She got some pads and she set me down in the bathroom. And then she's like,
Aw,
"This
that's
is
kinda
how
cute.
you do it."
That's
Yeah.
so sweet. But
Yeah.
honestly, it kind of makes me not to say feel better, but I remember when I got my period, like it was really uncomfortable because my mom used to work a lot.
Mhm.
My mom was not home. I was home with my stepdad. He was the only person home. I'm not gonna tell him like, "Hey, I just started my period for the first time. What do I do?"
Yeah.
Okay. So literally, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where pads were. I didn't know where anything was. So I literally had to use tissue to like figure out. And my mom wasn't gonna come for a whole day. Okay.
No.
And then when my mom finally came, I'm like, "Hey, mom, like I started my period," and she just handed it to me. I was like, "What do I do with this? Like, what do I do with this?"
And then there's no internet back in the day, no cell phone.
Girl, we ain't that old. There's definitely internet. So you either had the internet, were you paying for internet?
I was broke, so I did not have the cell phone.
Look,
Okay, Linda.
my mind did not think that far.
Not
Okay,
cell phone, your desktop.
I didn't
computer.
have that either.
my mom did not think that far, but I'm glad you brought that up because that just goes to show like that's another thing that needs to be brought up, you know, in education.
Yeah, and when you're the first, because I'm lucky that I am the baby in the family, and I love taking on that role. Because for me, it's like I won't be the first one out of my sibling group to experience
Yeah.
anything. Since I'm the baby, I have two older sisters. I have an older brother. So my sister already had her period. So when I had my period, I was like, hey, I have my period.
Yeah.
But I do remember when I first had my period, I did tell my mom, even though I knew my sister had, was having her period, I was still kind of scared about the fact that I started my period. So it was a little weird, but...
And now you're scared when you don't get it. Ain't that crazy?
Right.
How the tables
Yeah, but yeah, so I helped my friend. I told her how to like put the pad on, and then it was a success. But also like it's just a lack of information of like how to wear this, like, because if after the pad then it was like tampon, and I'm like, oh shit, like how do you do this for myself, because like, I would go on trips and sometimes I didn't have pads, and then I'm like, how do you wear a tampon? And then I had to like, this time I did have a cell phone and I did have Google, and that helped me.
Okay, about tampons, because Kathy, I want to say it's very much so recent that you start wearing tampons, because I remember
too.
Yes. So what took you so long to wear a tampon? Because I remember what you told me, so I don't know if you want to share that or not, but why were you so like against wearing tampons? Why were you like never wearing them?
So I got scared from wearing tampons because I heard that, like, how like it's in there, like the blood doesn't fully come out, so you get like blood stuck in your canal. I don't know if that makes sense. Did that make sense?
You feel that once you put a tampon in, it's going to block the release of
The blood, like
Of
I'll
blood-
get
of your
blood
menstrual
out,
flow,
but not
right?
the whole thing. You know what I'm saying?
okay.
So And then I also have like listened to the news about this girl that had
Toxic shock.
lost her like
Leg.
lost her leg because of tampons. And I was scared. I was like, I don't want to lose my legs. And then Linda was like, that's because you left it there for the whole day. And I was like, oh, so you changed it? And then she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so they're pretty absorbent. I don't know if you've seen the commercial with the blue water.
Yeah, and then I was also scared. Like, I don't want to be leaking. Like, you know, I don't. It was a lot of like,
Yeah.
because it was new to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know, like, do I wear a pad? So, yeah, it was interesting, and also like how to put it on. It was interesting.
That was so interesting.
Oh, God.
I think
remember
it's interesting if you're a virgin. Honestly, I think it's interesting if you're a
Oh,
virgin.
maybe because I was gonna
If you're-
say
yeah, for sure.
I was gonna say the first time I wore a tampon when I was in high school, and I remember because, you know, at St. Liz they had like 3-day activity trips. What did that call?
Oh,
was
it like it wasn't a Spirit Week? It was like
I want to say it was within Spirit Week, wasn't it?
yeah, but it was that you choose like what you wanted,
wanted
to
to
do for
do.
those 3 days.
Yes, because so I chose like a 3-day spa trip type thing in Napa, and one of the
That sounds fun.
It was so much fun, but I started my period.
That's
I always start my period on
Always.
like on trips and just important stuff.
You are not alone.
Yeah, we're linked. But anyways, because they had like pools and the mud bath. I was like, I want to do this, but how can I do this when I'm on my period and I wear pads? So my good old friend Vanessa is the one that actually like taught me how to use a tampon, because I want to say my sister was, well, I could have called her, but I think she was out of state for school. So I remember Vanessa telling me, you got to do this. You got to lean over on the toilet. You got to squat. You got to do this. Vanessa was literally coaching me how to
you
use a
through.
tampon.
That's interesting.
I could have used YouTube. But now that I think of, well, YouTube been popular, but I feel like I wasn't, well, knowing me, I probably did look it up on YouTube, but I remember Vanessa teaching me.
I had to teach myself how to use a tampon. Again, I taught myself.
So all these crazy stories, I feel that it's very normal. So if you're out there and you thought something dumb, it's not your fault. It's the education system in your parents for not teaching you certain things.
Yeah, and then also when I was doing research, I found out that only 39 states and the Columbia districts are the only states that having their school program or sex ed. The other states don't. So I'm like, I wonder how the other states are. Like
Like
where
what
are
they're doing?
Right.
You know what I wonder?
Where are they getting this information?
I wonder what their teen pregnancy rates are,
Right.
as compared to the rates where you are receiving sex education. Mm-hmm. I wonder what that is.
Right.
Maybe we'll update the listeners if we find that out.
Yeah, but then I also find out, and then it was also something that I did when I was doing community health that I thought is important. I felt like I wish this would have been taught to me when I was their age, which is the importance of consent.
Oh, that's very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then right now I was reading that in San Francisco, there is a school that is talking about like sex education, consent, sexual transmitted disease, their sexuality, like either if you're bisexual or if you're like gay, and then like just very like fluent, you know, like, and I was like, wow, I wish I knew that when I was their age, because consent, like we don't, and I feel like it's trippy for me because it's like, okay, so I know what consent is, but I'm like, did I, you know, like then you start thinking like past interactions that you had, and I'm like, did I give consent? You know what I'm saying?
Or when you're in that moment feeling kind of, you give consent and then wanting to change your mind, like that's okay too. But it's,
Yeah.
But then you're never like, oh, maybe it's not okay, you know? And then that's what I that was one of the lessons plans that we taught my high schoolers in community health about consent. And then these kids were so like awake, like they just knew like, yeah, I could say no, blah, blah. And I was like, I wish I was that way when I was your age. You know what I'm saying?
I think that, I don't want to say that's something that's become recent, But I think it is something that's become recently taught, especially with like everything that's happened, like the Me Too movement and just everything that's been going on. I was reading, because when I was looking up sex ed, there are different ways they teach it in states. And there's like the comprehensive one, and then there's, I forgot what the other one's called, but it's like basically there's like a comprehensive one, and there's one that was like, oh, say no to sex. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the comprehensive one definitely did include consent, teaching people about consent and things like that. But super important, because I can see how someone super young, about to have sex for the first time, not having had that conversation with family members about having sex, feeling all these different emotions about, should I do this, should I not, and then giving consent, and then being like, I don't know if I should or not, and then feeling uncomfortable, and they're like, well, I already said yeah. Like, I can see how someone would feel that way.
Yeah.
You know, so I consent's super important, and I'm glad that they have incorporated that into the curriculum, because I just think it's really important.
Needed. It's
Yeah,
needed.
and then doing the research, I found out a video about these adolescents that were getting like interview, and she talked about like the first time that she had sex, and she said, I regret it. Like, I shouldn't have done it, because all I did it was because he pressured me, because he was either I had sex with him or he would leave me. And we're talking about like young girls. Like, she broke down, like she just started crying.
That happens a lot.
Well, I'm gonna
unfortunately.
be honest, completely honest. That was definitely my experience.
With that
Same-
devil.
with the devil. With the devil, yeah. I just remember being like, I'm not ready, and then being pushed to. But yeah, that was definitely my. And of course, I didn't have the whole consent. That wasn't a thing back then. Or at least I didn't hear about it. So that was definitely my experience. So I'm glad that they're teaching that to people, so they at least, you know, can have that on their mind, that they don't have to go through with it if they don't want to.
Yeah, so I was like, well, it's starting in San Francisco. Hopefully, it just like expands
All
to
schools,
other
yeah,
schools.
adapt to it in a
and
sense.
then that way, it is something that it's important, and it should be in the curriculum.
I agree.
Agreed.
I agree. And I do agree with Jasmine was saying. I do feel like it's a recent thing in a sense, because I feel like just more people are becoming more aware of certain things and the
That are
lack
not okay.
of, and that's not okay. So we are moving forward. We just need to keep on moving and making sure that everyone is getting that equal education,
Even
and
if it's
everything.
uncomfortable.
Even if it's uncomfortable. Because even me, I know you guys see me blushing and stuff and getting all like uncomfortable telling a story, but I'm part of the generation where we weren't taught this stuff. So
Yeah. No.
want to close out?
I thought you had
Yeah.
stories.
Oh,
More stories. We have more stories?
you have more stories?
I thought you had stories.
Those could have
from
been
Reddit.
trickled in.
Oh, okay,
It was
but
like
still
more
later.
so like the Pat stories and everything, but we don't have
I
to.
don't
Okay,
have
okay,
any
okay.
like weird sex stories that I can think of.
I think she was referring to the stuff you
Reddit.
found on Reddit.
Yeah.
Oh, let's do it.
That's what I was like.
Let's do it.
These people.
You guys-
see what I deal with.
You guys talk.
Just
Give me
annoying.
time. Buy me time.
Yeah. This has been an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
It's been all over the place in a sense, but
Yeah.
it's good. We can just talk.
Okay, and then another thing that I want to talk about. That I feel like before, the woman didn't have a say.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it was just kind of like, we're doing it, and you're okay with it, you know?
Girl, we can go on and on. This is deeper
It-
than all
I
of
know.
this, because even then, like from marriages, and then I heard stories of like, oh, that's your husband, so you should be,
Right.
you have to when they say, and,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
No, like, no, like, but
That's
I'm
a lot.
glad that it's being talked about, because, like, you know, back in the day, like, what happened if you didn't want to? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, back then? Oh,
Yeah.
That was rough back then. Back then, I feel like they felt like they didn't have a choice, because
Yeah.
that was the status quo. That was the way things went, you know?
that was the,
We're really
the
lucky
norm.
nowadays. Like, it's changed a lot. There's still progress that needs to
Lucky
be
in
made.
the sense if you're breaking those cycles.
Yeah.
Because there's some
Yeah.
people who still like follow those norms.
No,
and
I
stuff.
agree, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, back then it was not okay to even try to break the cycle. Like, back then you were not only fighting your partner, whoever your partner was, but you're fighting like what is considered taboo, you know, or what's considered normal. So, anyways, I found the stories. So, here are some stories I found on sex ed. So here we go. In my question box, I often received, "What is a vulva?" As always, I read the question out loud, and immediately a student's hand shot up, and he was like, ooh, 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 I know this one. I don't usually take student answers during question box time, but he was just so thrilled to answer something that his peers seemingly that I did. Sorry. He was just so thrilled that to not call on that poor boy would have crushed him. So I did. To which he smiled the biggest smile and proudly exclaimed, "That's a car!" I managed to pour tea down my shirt as I did my best to keep from breaking down in the kinds of laughter that would destroy a student. He was mortified when I explained what it actually was. Honestly, vulva and Volvo, yeah, pretty. That's embarrassing.
But that's also, I feel like, the importance of men also knowing about women's bodies.
Yeah.
You know? Because that's also one thing that I want Tiago to know. Like, what does a woman, or like, if, you know, like his significant other or just a woman in general go through, like periods, birth, like, you know, like, come on, just be nicer to the woman, you know, like they
Mood
have a lot of
swings.
hormones.
Yeah,
like.
And since we were talking about menstrual cycles, way back when, there was a very confused boy, 12-ish I'd say, in my class who asked what that blue stuff women peed out during their periods was. The teacher, of course, explained it was blood and not blue stuff at all. He was amazed. He had seen the pad commercials on TV where they would pour blue water to show how absorbent, see, they're very absorbent, Kathy, how absorbent they are, and just figured women actually exuded bright blue liquid once a month.
How old was that kid?
12.
12?
I could see that. I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah, I feel like 12 a little bit too old, but then again, he's a boy.
Yeah.
He probably hadn't had that conversation.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
in a sense, even seen a pad. But kids in general pick up so much.
Mm-hmm.
You should try the test with your kid, Kathy, because I know he's what, two. Like, give him a bunch of things that you use and see if he knows what to do with it.
How to use it?
Like, you